Okay, let's pick it up in verse 18 of Romans chapter 1. One of those controversial passages for the critic, liberal theologian, and the liberal pastor. Um, you have God's wrath revealed against mankind. Verse 18 begins, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven. That's an interesting passage for people who claim that, we dealt with this in our last session, but that the God of the New Testament is somehow more loving than the God of the Old, and because he's rougher and so much more judgmental in the Old Testament. Well, I think this verse here begs to differ. We mentioned that there's grace in the Old Testament and there's wrath also in the New Testament. So the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. What's that mean? The word in the Greek, suppress the truth by their wickedness, is very interesting because it's as if you know something to be true, and then suppressing that truth is a continual pushing down, a rejection of what I know to be true. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to bow the knee. I don't want to know that there's a God. After all, then I'm accountable. I have to answer to God, and I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it Sinatra's way. I'm going to do it my way of the highway. So I don't want to follow God. So I don't want to hear anything about the Bible, blah, 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 blah. What's so wrong with the message of forgiveness? Ever thought of that? Did you know you can have immortality? You can live forever. Just believe in Jesus Christ and admit to what you already know is true. That you're all jacked up. You are a sinner and you are in need of redemption. Nobody likes to hear that, but it's true. What's so bad about being offered forgiveness? What's so bad about it? People hate it, and I don't get it. Well, they suppress the truth, and they want to be left alone. How do they suppress the truth? By continual rejection, pushing down of the truth, what's already been made plain to them. We have in verse 19, since what may be known about God is plain to them. How is it plain? The existence of God is plain to all of humanity, including the atheists. How is it plain? It says because God has made it plain to them. Verse 20, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes or qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made or created, so that, reason marker, circle that word, so that men are without excuse. So you have three reason markers in this passage, 18, 19, and 20. Verse 19, since what may be known? The word since presupposes um, um, a reason marker, we call it. And then in verse 20, for since the creation, that's another reason marker. For since, it just presupposes that God created the world. And then you have the conclusion marker at the end of verse 20, so that men are without excuse. Good hermeneutics to circle terms like that. So it seems that there are no real atheists based on this passage, right? I think that there's two stages to atheism. Number one is just like a child. No, everyone's born a theist. You walk outside, you see the blue sky, you go, Mom, Dad, who painted the sky? It's just like obvious. There has to be someone out there that's bigger than me who brought the universe into existence, including us. So no child is born an atheist. It's adults that pregnate their minds with atheism and wrong ideas, and then there they go. So the first stage for the atheist, I think, is he gives up what is made plain to him by God. The existence of God is clear. Then once they make that choice and move over to defending atheism, in time they become so self-deluded they believe their own ideas, which is often grounded in self-pity and wrath. A lot of atheists are seriously crybabies that have bad upbringing. They hate their mom or dad. Therefore, we don't want the Father in the sky. And the God of the Old Testament is violent. Never mind, let's study archaeology and find out what these folks really did, and so forth. So, having said that, this passage really goes head on against atheism. Gottfried Leibniz of Germany, he said, why is there something rather than nothing? Human beings, going back to Athens, Greek philosophy. Um, Man has always wondered. And that's what's beautiful about man. God has created us with a sense of wonder. Who, where, what, when, why. We want to figure things out. I've studied this stuff now for 23 years. Philosophy, apologetics, Bible, theology, and I love it, and I can't get enough. And so it's how we answer our questions. That's what's important. So when he says, why is there something rather than nothing at all? It doesn't take an Einstein to figure out that from nothing comes nothing, right? So if there's no God and the universe is finite, why is it here? It can't just pop out of nothing, from nothing, by nothing. Out of nothing, nothing comes. So there must be someone out there, some being that's much more powerful than us, at least a deistic being, right? Because omnipotence, the idea that God is all-powerful, self-existing, and so forth, that's from revealed scripture. You can't figure that out by staring at a tree. But you can figure out that there's a being out there who's a lot more powerful than me, you know, who brought the universe into existence. So I think that the idea that God exists, it's self-evident. We're wired to believe that. Giving that up, we end up pursuing folly, vain philosophy, the type of philosophy that Paul tells us to stay away from. All right? Not good, true philosophy, but vain philosophy. In philosophy, there's a principle that's known as the principle of sufficient reason. And it says everything that exists needs a reason for its existence. This is true. You look at a car. Why is it here? You presuppose that it was made by a car maker, but you weren't there. You didn't see it. You see a fan, or you see a coffee mug, you see a tree, you see a building, a house, a skyscraper, you see a freeway. You didn't see who put it up or who created it, but you just know, based on causality, that something brought those things into existence, right? Somebody created the building. There was a builder. I see a building, there's a builder. I see a car, you know there's a car manufacturer, and so forth. That's just logic. Every effect has a cost. You're observing the effect, it must have a cost. Now, when you're dealing with the origin of the universe, we weren't there. And that's what's called forensic science. God was there, so he can report to Moses what happened. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But because we weren't there, we have scripture, but we can test scripture also with science, because there's two books written by God, all right? There's nature, the book of nature that he created that will report truth to us, okay? And then you have the Holy Scriptures, which is his second book, right? The universe was created, and then we have Holy Scripture given to us. But the Holy Scripture is, of course, everlasting, right? The universe is finite. So by studying nature and natural theology and so forth, and lining it up with the Scriptures, the two never contradict. They just don't. Because the same being behind the Bible is the same being behind the universe. So while it's true that the principle of sufficient reason, claiming that all that exists needs an explanation for its existence, is true of everything except for God. He doesn't need an explanation for his existence. Nothing caused God. Nothing brought God into existence. He is pure existence. He is what we call pure isness. He just is. The Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Nothing brought God into being. He has no parents. When you ask the question, where did God come from? It's a wrongly asked question. In logic, that's called a category error. A category error is asking the wrong thing about a thing. For example, how much does yellow weigh? Or, let me ask you this, does blue, the color blue, run faster than Monday? The sentence makes no sense, because you don't couple Monday with speed, running, and so forth. You don't ask, what does yellow weigh like? You know, what did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday tell you? You know, days don't speak. So when we ask of God, where did he come from? It presupposes that everything that exists has a cause. And we're not claiming that. We claim that anything that begins to exist has a cause. 2, the universe began to exist. 3, therefore the universe requires a cause. That's called the Kalam cosmological argument. So the principle of sufficient reason is true of finite things, including angels, including man, including the planet. We are finite. We had a beginning point, but we will live forever. But we will not live forever in the sense that God is everlasting. He had no beginning point. He has no end. We had a beginning point, but have no end. So we're sort of potentially eternal or potentially infinite, while he's actual infinitude or eternal as such. Same thing with angels. They had a beginning point. We don't. All right. Moving on. What else can we share here? Oh, a little bit. Some of my. I want to get this in for you. His eternal power and divine nature, again, I mentioned, is clear on the created order. It follows that, these are some good one-liners you might want to write down. It follows that design requires a designer. It follows that you cannot get mind information from non-mind, like the atheist would argue. It stands to reason that the data or information and codes embedded in the DNA, right, could not have arisen from chance. Codes come from a code maker. Likewise, inanimate objects, say like the acorn. A little acorn progresses towards its goal of becoming a mature oak tree, right? And that's what we call teleology or teleonomy. Inanimate things like the acorn doesn't have emotion, will, or a brain, or a desire. Yet it's progressing towards its natural goal. Its teleological purpose is to become a mature oak tree. Why? How does that happen by itself? Somebody had to put information into the acorn for it to progress, because it doesn't will. It doesn't say, when I grow up, I want to be like a mature oak tree like Dad. No. Yet it's progressing without volition, without will, of becoming that big, giant oak tree. How are these things possible? Somebody had to input the information into that acorn, and that's what's called teleology. All right? So to deny this is indeed folly. Remember, the psalmist says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. All right, verse 21. For although they knew God, they neither glorified nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Heavy words there. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. And they exchanged, just like they suppressed the truth, right? Here they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal man and birds and animals and reptiles. Reminds me of walking into an Asian restaurant and I see Buddha on the floor with $5 bills in it, and then, maybe there's a tomato or some food. For crying out loud, the Buddha can't even feed himself. You have to feed your God, The ancient Buddha, he didn't rise from the dead. His real name was Siddhartha Gautama, and he did not ask for worship. They have deified him. But anyway, in the passage here, notice the lack of gratitude and unthankfulness for God's creation and grace. Interestingly, it was this same attitude of unthankfulness that caused both Lucifer and Adam to fall. Lucifer was prideful, and what's opposite of pride? Humility and thankfulness. He lacked both. Adam should have humbly listened to his Maker, being thankful for what God had already provided him. And Eve should have been thankful and content, like Paul was. I've learned to be content in whatever state I am. And all that God had provided for her and Adam. But instead, they wanted more and more and more. So, opposite of humility, this attitude of unthankfulness, not recognizing, not being thankful for God's creation and his grace, instead of, feeling as if God is holding something back from us or he's unfair. We saw that with Lucifer, who wanted more. Same thing with Adam and Eve. So In verse 24, therefore, God gave them over to the sinful desires. We're going to pick up what that means in our final segment. Stay tuned.